Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Activities for People Living at Home with Dementia. We are proud to offer this series with funding from the Area Agency on Aging and the United Way of Tarrant County. These programs are recorded and are made available for viewing through a YouTube channel for future use. I am your host for today's activities. We have Peggy Spear with us, who is going to talk medical about the art from Amon Carter Museum of American Art. I can't wait to see what medical means to Peggy Spear. What about you?
All right, let me take control of the screen and we will start from the top. So we have medical is pretty big. So I went into our collection. We have a lot of photographs of, especially from American Indian reservations, of some of the medical government involvement with immunization and that type of rollout that happened in the early 1900s. And then we have a lot of medical of military, set up things like that, hospitals. So I tried to find a variety of things. We did have some prints that we'll start off with, and then we'll move to the photographs. So we got here an artwork named X-ray. What do we see?
A funny X-ray.
Right?
Oh, and he's
not like
standing
the way
there.
they look today.
He's standing there while they're looking.
Yeah, which is not scientifically accurate.
So it's interesting. This artwork has like 5 different titles depending on what museum you are finding this artwork. So we have it called X-rays. These are all the other titles that museums have called it. The Fluoroscope, Department of Interiors, and Doctor Consultation of the Interiors. So there are several names. Department of Interiors, I thought was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
But fluoroscope is one of them. And that is actually the name of the particular X-ray machine type that they're using. So this is, I'm not even sure if it's still in practice. This was a type of X-ray that was used at the time. And the way it is, it actually is a screen that you can see he's standing behind a dark board. That was true of how it would work. And then it's almost like a live TV, so to speak, like a closed circuit of what would be your abdominal intestinal region.
Yeah.
So you could actually see it live time without having to take film or picture to create.
Welcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So what did they use to take the pictures?
Oof. So I am not a radiologist by any stretch of the imagination. I am not sure. I don't even know if this science is still used. X-rays were another form of radiology at the time, and this is not an X-ray in the truest sense. Yes, we are seeing inside, but it's using a fluoroscope. So I don't know what the X-ray machines look like then.
It's very exposed if they are using some kind of rays.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good point, Yetta. There's inaccuracies that are depicted here because John Sloan, the artist, is the man standing behind the X-ray machine. And so he's standing in the dark and he's drawing this from his memory of actually being in the doctor's office.
Okay.
So he's not 100% sure what he's seeing or not seeing because his eyes had trouble seeing in the dark.
Yeah. Looks like he's drinking something. He's drinking something that would help them see what's going on in his intestines.
That's what I think you're right. I don't know what that fluid is, but
it's nasty.
Doggy, come here, girl. Come here.
So also, but back to what Yetta was saying, we're just kind of like, where is this picture? He doesn't, or the rays, he's not wearing a lead vest, which they would have worn a lead vest at that time. And so there is that inaccuracy. among others in this particular scene. So
Probably.
he would have been wearing a vest of some sort, I guess, to protect the other parts of his body.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was in the late 1800s where they were using X-ray machines to make sure your shoes fit when you went to the shoe store.
Oh, I remember that.
And that would cause many health issues at
Oh
the
my
time.
gosh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was in the 20s, this was taken. And what's kind of cool about this drawing, this etching, is that this is one of the earliest and only American artist depictions of what radiology looked like at that time in the country. So this, medical schools have copies of this, art museums have copies of this. So it was kind of an interesting piece in its day, and even for now, because they weren't taking photographs in these spaces of what the technology and how that might have been used and things like that. So this is an interesting documentation, so to speak, of this technology.
According to Google, as opposed to an X-ray, a fluoroscope is actually a moving.
Yeah.
They put the dye in it, so you're actually seeing what's happening with the body as it's going along.
Yeah,
Where an
it's
X-ray is
live
just a
time,
single
it's not
point.
a still film.
Yeah. So it's more like a continuous image X-ray.
Yeah,
is
it's
what
sort
it
of like a
says.
scope. It's like an earlier version of a scope, so to speak.
Yeah.
The
only thing,
goggles. Oh, go ahead.
the only thing I think is close that we would do today is like a barium.
Yeah, and that's basically what it is. They still use fluoroscope technology in those type of settings.
Yeah.
We have the contrast dye.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's not under like he might be for barium or for some of those scopes that we use today that would go down. So he is awake. He did these drawings. This particular drawing didn't sell in as well as others. There's 55 editions of this particular etching. And for whatever reason, it didn't sell the way some of his other etchings did. But he used the money from his etchings to pay for medical situations he was having at the time. So kind of tied hand in hand. And another particular inaccuracy is that the doctors are wearing red goggles, which from what some art historians have found, doctors would not need to be wearing these goggles for this type of technology. And that screen isn't 100% accurate as to what that screen would look like.
Yeah.
So while this is an earlier version, this is a version that people use to understand how radiology was done at the time. There's a lot of inaccuracies we know just because of some of the equipment he's depicting. But Sloan was really well known in his day, and he was part of a group, the Ashcan group, and we've talked about that group of artists before, where they were known for depicting urban life in a way that was almost the gritty side of it, the white or the blue collar workers, kind of the underbelly of the city. And so not, the everyday, so to speak. And so this was an example, not the perfect example of him doing that type of, but it's, urban life, going to the doctor, this type of situation that most people could understand or relate to. So it's kind of funny, and you can see their diplomas in the back.
Yeah. It looks like the whole thing is set on a pulley system. You see pulleys
up
on
here.
On the ceiling,
Yes.
What's in his left hand?
The
doctor.
Which one? This man?
The doctor.
The doctor.
Oh, I think he's adjusting the fluoroscope.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, can somebody put the Zoom link in the chat box, please?
I'll do it. Let go, bird.
Something else, it looks like they're sitting on like kitchen chairs instead of little round doctor stools too.
Yeah, I wonder if this was like the interiors of the original doctor's office in the city, how things have started to change. And it was really during right after this, during the Depression, that medicine started to change pretty rapidly with the schooling of the nurses and technology. So we're like on the cusp of a lot of medical advancement starting. So with that said, we're gonna leave this dark X-ray and head to the children's clinic. So this is another New York scene by an artist, and her name is Mabel Dwight, and she was very well known in her day, and known for depicting celebrating the ordinariness of everyday life. So I feel like you can feel the energy in this particular image. What kind of jumps out at you first?
Baby's crying.
So do you think it would be loud or quiet in this?
Oh, I think it'd be very loud.
Very loud.
Very loud. Because there's more than one crying baby. We've got 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Right there.
That one almost in between the doctor and the other one looks like he's almost ready to cry too.
Yeah, right behind him.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right there. Yeah.
And I'm sure with the crying, you're hearing then the moms, the shh, or the, all right, everybody calm down, like whatever.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting, it looks like he's doing an examination of the child in the waiting area.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it looks like he is. And so what we're seeing here is this children's clinic, and it was for families on welfare. So they did not have the luxury of a private appointment, and that was starting to change these ideas of clinics during the Depression, that only the people who could afford medical care were having these private doctors and nurses come to their house. Well, that, was changing. And so this was an impoverished community, and their doctors were trying to get through as many patients as they could at a time.
Yeah.
And so you sort of feel, and deliberately the artist did this, you feel an empathy towards the doctor and the nurses, because she's depicting them in the best light, that these are attentive, they're coming, there looks like there might be an exam room back there, but these doctors are coming to these families and helping them immediately. And there's a nurse, right there ready to help, but they're coming to the people versus the people having to do more to find them.
Hey, the lady on the right, that looks like she has a funny hat on.
Yes.
Do you think she's a nurse or just a mother or something?
No, she was a nurse.
She's a nurse, okay.
And it was during the late 1920s to the mid 1930s that there was an increase in graduating nurses from nursing school, and they were entering hospitals right away, whereas prior they had been in private practice. So while there was a major influx of more educated professionals entering the workforce, they were still only getting paid as student nurses. So she was speaking to this idea of, even though these nurses, she was most likely in the time of this lithograph, an educated nurse, and in New York City had an education, was still only getting paid the same as someone who was either in school or right out of school. So it was speaking again to the praises of these professionals who were doing whatever they could to help humanity, and without the pay associated with it. The same way teachers might have been viewed sympathetically, nurses, doctors, that type of thing.
Wonder if this is kind of more of a triage situation where they're kind of isolating which is the most serious cases and then sending them back.
Yeah.
She's depicting something that she might have had experience with, or were common pop-ups clinics in New York during the Depression. So it could have been an emergency type of situation, or it could have just been sick kids with no other help for childcare because they're either single parents or their husband is working, and it's like a whole family affair bringing all of the kids just for the one sick kid. You know, it's.
Of course,
any
that
mom
might
or
not
any
be in it.
parent- Oh, say that again, Steve.
That might not be an examining room. That might be the entryway, and all the fathers are out there.
The men we
fathers are
see,
at home. Fathers
Yeah,
are
fathers are at home or at work. Yeah.
Well,
that-
or
the two-
grandparents or grandfather or somebody,
the
else
two
in the
men look
family.
very much alike, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. They look, the guys with glasses look like doctors.
that's right.
Yeah, and you can see in here that the lights, look, there's another light fixture that mirrors
Mhm.
that one, but there seems to be an exam table, and that child doesn't seem to have
Okay,
on
that's-
all of
that's
the
true, yeah.
clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a woman, a nurse, like the hat and the hat and the hat.
Yeah.
It looks like that
Mm,
child is
okay.
actually with
Okay,
in a formal exam room, but they're so inundated, anything could have really been an exam room at that time.
Well, and it's winter because the women have on heavy coats and the children do.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Stars wrapped around the heads. And
Yes.
so I'm sure if any of you have children and have been to the doctor, the pediatrician's office during the winter, it is a freaking zoo
Yes.
in that place. So I will say that with COVID, you don't wait with the pediatrician's office right now, and you don't wait in the
That's right.
you just sit in your car, which sitting in an idle car in a car seat is almost just as bad as going into the doctor's office and just not getting called back. But there is some of that removal from you interacting with other sick patients, even if it's not COVID. So anyway, this artwork is in many collections throughout the country. It's a pretty hallmark artwork of Mabel Dwight's, and so this is very a good example of the type of work she was doing. A lot of satire, a lot of social situations that many people from really all walks of life, but in urban settings, could relate to. All right, so now we're leaving the city behind us, and we're going to an artwork by the artist Grant Wood, and he is the one who has, you can think of the man holding the pitchfork next to the woman.
Oh,
This is that same artist.
now that you mention it, I see a style.
Yeah. Yeah, so this particular artist is one of a few that were in this movement called regionalism. And regionalism was real big in the Midwest. It was in the Midwest, and it was this focus on the rural life, the simplicity of rural life, which was truly kind of American at this point. And it wasn't the focus on, like we're seeing here, that the hustle and bustle of a city. It was the focus on farm life and agricultural existence and the small town.
and he probably made house calls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How many of you did any of you have doctors growing up that were house call doctors?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you grow up in smaller town or a big city?
Small.
Medium-sized towns, suburbs.
Tiny, tiny town.
Okay.
5,000.
Oh yeah. Oh, house calls for sure.
Mhm.
And was your doctor even a vet? I mean, did that ever sync
An
up?
MD. I can remember my father saying that DOs were evil. Funny that I love DOs. I think they're so smart. But my
Yeah.
dad wouldn't trust a DO, so it had to have been an MD.
Oh, how funny.
The best docs now are DOs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I can remember I had in fact, I still have chronic respiratory problems, but once or twice my doctor in snowstorm drove out to the suburbs, and he treated me with examination and usually a shot to go with
Oh, really?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not seeing that needle, but we are seeing what, even in an exam room, you've got your thermometer,
Yep.
your stethoscope, which is seeing how that technology has changed over time, and then his stopwatch. So, you know, he looks like he's not in the first one, we're seeing them in their white lab coat, and here it looks like he's in his coat, tie.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's more like a house call.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, I agree.
They
Yeah.
didn't wear the white coats for the house calls. They just wore their suits.
Yeah.
Yep.
And nowadays, if a doctor has his tie loose, that's a no-no.
Mhm.
Yeah, not a good day.
Mm-mm.
Today would be a concierge doctor.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
Right, Steve.
John said, what about the tie loose?
It would be unsanitary nowadays if a doctor comes in with a loose tie, because if he leans over you, then he might be giving you germs from the last person he leaned over. So they have to keep them clipped or in a pocket or tucked in or under their jacket or.
My dad doesn't wear a tie anymore. We used to always get him ties for like Father's Day.
Yeah.
And like as we grew up, my mom was like, y'all, he never wore ties. Like, I don't know why you thought that he needed all these ties. He had so many ties from us. He never wore them.
A lot more doctors these days, particularly in hospital settings, are wearing more polo shirts and things like that rather than the ties and the
Casual.
Comfortable stuff.
comfortable.
Well,
Yes.
and what's interesting too is I know my dad is a surgeon, and they used to do, and I think it's changing now across a lot of hospitals, they used to, you left your scrubs at the hospital and they would be washed by a laundry service there. And so it never left, you know, the sterile environment. It was always within. Well, now you have to like buy your own scrubs and you bring them home and wash them. And
clean them
it's
yourself.
very different, which is shocking because you think, what if someone's blood got on you or whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you are in your PPE and everything, but still, just very different.
One of my good friends was a chaplain, Emily Anderson. She was a nun. You know, this was back in the, I say, 80s. She was there probably in the 70s. You know, when some of the nurses still had to wear those clunky shoes. And she wore Reeboks, and she finally got the medical staff at the hospital to understand the nurses are going to be more efficient if they wear good shoes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So she got them to wear tennis shoes.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, and it was kind of, this is neat. There's an old nun, and she just, you know, with her black habit, running around with those Reeboks on.
How cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember the difference between this pointy thermometer and one that had kind of a rounded bulb?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So is this the pointier one?
Yes.
Yes.
That's for the mouth.
Yeah, now.
Yeah.
The other one went other places.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember we had a rectum one for my or I was old enough to remember seeing my mom use that on the baby, the rectum one.
Mhm.
Nowadays the thermometer, and I'm sure y'all have some just because you're getting thermometer checked everywhere you go. You know, they do it on your forehead, your ear. It's like everything's digital. 2 seconds.
Yeah, at the hospital, you check in at the front, and you just put your wrist next to the sensor, and it measures your temperature. Says good to go, you know, type of thing. But then when I got into the prep room, they actually used just a regular thermometer.
Oh, they like, yeah.
It's stuck under my thumb, under my tongue.
When you check into the hospital now, you just walk up and stand in front of a screen.
Right.
And it takes your temperature.
Yeah.
I know that during all of COVID, there were companies, I know, and I'm thinking of a company particularly in Baltimore, but a lot of office equipment companies that had digital technology weren't being needed. So they quickly pivoted to try to work on innovating thermometer technology for quick and rapid use. And so that, I'm sure that technology in the last year is just leaps and bounds better
Yeah.
and more
Oh, yeah.
efficient than 3
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, I was surprised because very seldom have I ever had one under my tongue lately. It's always been the forehead or my wrist or someplace, my ear.
Yeah.
But I guess they want it under the tongue for the absolute,
Yeah, we
Best.
at our house we use the back of
Right.
Myers' hand.
yeah,
Yeah,
illustration.
or mama's forehead.
Oh, yeah.
While I
Yeah.
was in the hospital last week, it depended, it seemed like, on what kind of cart they rolled into the room, how it was equipped. I had my temperature taken almost every way possible except with the round ended balls.
Yeah.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, some tools of the trade and the stethoscope, of course, we've seen how that's changed over time, and stopwatches. Now we've got Apple watches, and the
Yeah.
technology, even on your Apple watch, you can EKG stuff can go back to your doctor. I mean,
Well, they put the little
yeah.
sensors to get your blood oxygen level
Yeah.
and everything else,
Diabetic.
and it's all very different.
It's all very different, and it's all stuff now that you might have only had access to if the doctor came to your house, and now you can get it at CVS. Or,
Yeah,
you know.
we,
Or
we
you
have
can buy it
one of those.
off
We have one of those
Amazon,
pulse ox sensors here
and-
at our
yeah.
house.
Because I've got the oximeter at home, I can put on my finger and just check.
Yep, so do we.
Yep. You can even, there's some apps on your phone. If you hold your phone to the flashlight,
Right.
it tells you your heart rate. So
Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Mhm.
and I was saying with the Apple Watch, now there are certain apps that you can, if you have like heart issues or things like that, it's sending
Right.
information to your doctor if you've downloaded that app. So there is more information than you ever need to know available.
Exactly.
We've got one more photograph, or the only photograph for one more artwork. And this one we tapped on it earlier, but this particular photograph is entitled Mrs. Red Bear Watches While Government Doctor Immunize Her Little Daughter. And this was taken in sometime between 1936 and 42.
Probably on an Indian reservation.
Yep.
Yep.
And while this was taken almost 100 years ago, there's so much today that still translates from this photograph to what's happening today. So this was our notes. The database says Sioux. This was a Sioux reservation. And this particular photograph did a lot of photographs of the Navajo. So she was, working in the northern part of the country. But what we see here, and it didn't specify, and I wasn't able to find specifically what particular immunization that was, but given research around that time and the particular tribe, any guesses on what this vaccination probably would have been?
Smallpox.
Smallpox, yes.
Smallpox.
Yeah.
So smallpox would have been earlier in the 1900s. By this point, it was probably tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis. Oh,
Yeah, could
okay.
be.
So
Folks,
TB,
I'm gonna have to leave, so I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you,
Bye,
Peggy.
Steve. Good seeing you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Steve.
Bye.
Bye, Steve.
So by this point, the Bureau of Indian Affairs had stepped in to really help advocate for the health and well-being of these American Indian reservations. These tuberculosis just ran through so many reservations, and at many points during the early 1900s, the death rate was higher than the birth rate, and children were needing to get these vaccinations. Everybody was, but children weren't making it out of childhood because of tuberculosis. So it was important that these impoverished and many of these, which is still often the case now, these reservations were not getting the medical attention the same way that American citizens were. So the government was stepping in, which right here, this is a government doctor administering a vaccination. Yeah. There's research that shows or suggests, and in some case proves, that some of these immunizations were issued unethically, and they were almost testing immunizations on American Indian tribes
Oh, really?
to check its efficacy. And these families were not told that as they were getting the immunizations. So I don't know if this is the situation here, but this was happening throughout, parts of Canada and the United States when immunizations were being administered. Today, with COVID, this was the same type of thing that was going on, where COVID was just ripping through the reservations. And then when they were offering vaccination, there was a lot of resistance at first from some of these tribes, because it's like a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, the government's giving us immunization. Some, American Indians were saying it's in our DNA to not want them because we've been so mistreated in the past.
Yeah.
Government-issued immunizations. So, again, this was 100 years ago, and these effects are still are what we're dealing with in the United States today. And so this was initially bureaus of Indian Affairs was helping spearhead getting these vaccinations, getting them equal health care to the rest of the United States. That ended up switching from the BIA to the Public Health Department. And then within the Public Health Department, there's another American Indian division that was really geared towards immunizing the nations. And that wasn't until the 1950s that they got their own part of public health. So it's a really complicated history. It's a really sad history.
Yeah.
But it's something that, is still really relevant today. So we have several different photographers and several different versions of government doctors going to these images of government doctors going to these reservations for just general health, for tuberculosis, diphtheria. And the thought was that if we can immunize the people, we don't have to worry about the poor living conditions. Instead of addressing that was cheaper than addressing the poor living conditions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very sad, like I said, very sad and very complicated history, but something that hopefully with this awakening of equality that's happening in our country, that might be better addressed as we move forward. So not to get political on you, but it's just part of the American history that you're continuing to see, sadly.
Yay, Peggy.
All right, well, hate to leave you on a downer, but geez, here we are.
How about if we don't leave on a downer? Can I show you something, Peggy?
Please.
This was
I love a show and tell.
I'm going to show you a print that was one of Martin's favorites.
Oh, is that a Norman Rockwell?
It's a print, yeah.
Cool. So can you kind of describe, just because of the reflection, can you kind of describe what we see? It looks like a doctor.
There's a doctor and there's a little girl, and the little girl has a doll. And he's having to look at the little girl, the doll first, before the little girl will let him touch.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
He's listening to the doll's heart. And there's a desk behind him, and they're both sitting in wooden chairs.
How perfect for today.
Yeah.
I was hoping that you might have that, and I pulled this out just in case.
No, you know what? We don't have many Norman Rockwells. I don't even know if we have one. Surely we have one, but we don't have many Norman Rockwells, and we did not have that one.
Do you want me to leave it to you in my will?
You know what? Bequest it to the museum. They will be forever grateful.
Well, it's either that or goodwill.
They'll do that today. They test with the little babies. They'll test. Bring your doll, and they'll show what they're doing to the doll first, so then that kid isn't scared.
Yes. Thank you for letting me show that.
Yes, how cool.
That was
next week is military, because we are gearing up for Memorial Day weekend. So I'll throw you all sorts of military pictures. I haven't picked them yet, but I know we have a large focus in our collection. So
well, that'll be great.
Yeah. So bring your stories, and I hope you have a really wonderful week, and I will see you next week.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Miss Peggy.
Bye, y'all.
We look forward to military. I guess we've lost Steve,
Yeah, he said he had to go to another meeting.
and I just walked away.
Oh, you were probably getting the picture.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, tomorrow, I have no idea what the topic is. They haven't told us. Gail has an email into Fort Worth Museum of Science and History. So it says surprise topic because we have no idea. And then on Friday, we have a surprise Texas wins because we don't know that either.